My first introduction into this molecule, this is the graphic representation of the laminin. I'm not even sure if science agrees with this, but this is what I found on the internet and several others. My original interest in this, I'd have to go through a little bit of history. Back in the 80s, I had a series of events of experiencing higher worlds. I mean, very vividly, very graphically, very personally, where I wanted to learn how to bring the access to higher worlds down into the effective usability of being in the body. At first, I wanted nothing to do with the body, nothing to do with nutrition or molecules or supplements, and then nothing to do with the mind and nothing to do with relationships. I just wanted to do it using divine love or a relationship to God. So my experience was first about how to combine the 4 constitutional patterns associated with the RAYID method of Iris. So those 4 to me also correspond to this crossover point of the 4 different energies being electro and magnetic, gravitational and force, and those were the 4 figures of physics where I'm attempting to bring this into the body. A medical friend, a well-respected medical friend, said, well, what you're describing is I'm describing how to open self or physical body so that higher consciousness can occupy the matter of my physicality and the disposition of my mind or consciousness. So how to bring divine consciousness into matter and manifest that into the body. So I spent months meditating on this axis and having a series of experiences. I did not understand what I was looking at or feeling, but then I found out that what I was feeling at this point was associated to feeling a single molecule, and the likelihood of one or more molecules determining the magnitude or scale of the body types, mind, disposition. So this ends up being the interior guidance mechanism to determine the shape, physicality, well-being, memory of, and eventually the diseases associated with glands, organs, and body systems. So I wanted to get to this place. After spending many months, many hours trying to get there, I did get there briefly and found out that I was not qualified to be there. What that meant was, it was very disappointing, is in order to occupy this point here of the capacity to open with one's own volition and will, to open one's capacity to spiritualize my consciousness in the body, is it needed a certain threshold of the capacity to open this. That threshold had to do with a single molecule. That molecule was the oxytocin molecule, I find out later, and that was the molecule associated with bonding and feeling and some degrees of a type of love, a giving and receiving function of love. And that I was at that time incapable of being able to produce the adequate level of the degree of love in order to access this aperture that would enable me to be able to spiritualize my body with higher consciousness. So then it kicked me back down to deal with the lower levels of this, which has to do with emotional reaction, addiction, projections, need, it has to do with responsibility about feeling and will. So I've been slowly climbing this ladder by dealing with the unresolved emotional patterns in childhood and then in the family tree, and then specifically in the methylation memory of myself that I've created and was in my parents and in my grandparents. So I was involved in trying to move this. The interesting thing about this position, which I call the fourth level, was that it is primarily opened by the integration between people who were kindred in their interest. That kindred quality would be the experience of friendship. So one of the things that dilates this principle here is not just the emotional bonding, but the circulation of feeling associated with one friend aligning with another friend, and the circulation between friendship association being one of the instruments to amplify or magnify the degree of love. Hence, we need to love one another in order to enter into that category. And this showed me my woeful inadequacy about being able to do that, because that would really require that you actually like people. And at the time, I was not noticeably good at liking what people did in the world, because they're idiots of cruelty and pain and suffering, and pardon my judgment, but they were materialists, not really interested in the actual circulation of the fraternal experience of love. So for me, this is still the model of where to be. Now, with the arrival of science on the scene of this, I'm now realizing that there is an opportunity to penetrate deeper into the molecular understanding and its association with the likelihood of gender-based hormone functions in association with this, to actually navigate the body type being feminine, masculine, and to some degree or another, feminine, masculine on the mother's side, feminine and masculine on the father's side, where the requisite levels of certain molecules, be it insulin or triglycerides or estrogen versus testosterone, and I don't know, all of the messenger molecules of the hormonal level of each one of the glands as the messengers for how this opens. I'm still interested in occupying this position. So then along came some of the Steiner work that was presented me by someone delightful called Marlowe. Let me show you the picture. So this is the page out of the Steiner book that talks about the rhythmic flow of the vertical axes of consciousness over what I read was approximately 21,000 years, which, by the way, ends up being the time period of a year for this to go back and forth. And the crossover point where it was equilibrated, meaning equal on both sides and capable of being most fluid, was at the equinox. So for me, the crossover point on that laminin molecule has to do with that single point. This vertical axis function being higher or lower in the solstice seasons, meaning higher in the outer world on the summer solstice, higher in the lower world on the winter solstice. And this is basically a yin-yang composite of, in the summer, we're more outer material function. In the winter, we're more inward mental or feeling function, inside body, outside body, materialization, and spirit. So inside out functions. So that's why, for me, each one of these variations in yin-yang function also corresponds to gland, organ, body system that is currently dominant to produce this relative body type. So each one of these is a varying degree of hormonal communication into the biochemical function, into gland, organ, body system, and so on and so on. These are activated at different times of the year or different times of the day. Now, I'm pretty sure this is also the rhythm of one breath, but that's a whole nother story, that this is holographic over 21,000 years, or 1 year, or 1 day, or 1 hour. So that's why I started incorporating the use of how to be in harmony with this fluid dynamics from the point of the laminin molecule. So let me show you one more picture. So for me, this is the theoretical combination of the applied function of the laminin molecule that is holographic to the etheric body, astral body, soul, and the planets, galaxy, universe, and so on. So this is the instrumentation of what the laminin molecule is intended to access. Now that point where it meets, right there where my finger is, to me is at the bottom of the heart or slightly in the back. What that means is that the laminin molecule point is not the middle of the heart or the top of the heart. It may be at the top of the heart in the summer and the bottom of the heart during the winter, but this is the point where potentially that is accessible. Now, I'm still interested in emotionally how to access this point. So what I'm practicing is the periodic learning of, for example, this color blue corresponding to the first month of autumn, and the color pink, the second month of autumn, the third month of autumn, and then all of the ascending months being the masculine side of the gender until the equinox is at the beginning of the outside or the summer season. And this goes all the way up to the solstice at the top and then back down again. This is a cycle of 1 year, but it's also the fluid dynamics of the laminin molecule. Now that can be applied to other things. Now I'm pretty sure that there are specific molecules of hormones associated to each one of these, and that if I'm a person and I have an outdoor body type, then I've got a yang, bigger bone, higher bone structure, more pituitary function. But if I have a smaller frame, then I'm a yin body type, and on the mother's side and so on, that this is all 12 body types and the corresponding hormonal influences that would affect them. Theoretically, that's what I think it would be. Now, I'm interested in being able to identify the individual opposite molecules in each one of these locations. But the first one still has perplexed me from the beginning. What is the opposite molecule of an oxytocin molecule designed to be the primary gate that holds all of the connective tissue together, the skin being one layer, which I saw in the image. I saw that one. Then you have the layers below it. You have layers or degrees of it controlled by different hormonal messengers into the nervous system and then into the messaging system of the blood. The truth is, I don't understand this. I don't have the scientific background to use the vocabulary to try and understand what I get a glimpse of. It's a little frustrating to realize that the access to higher consciousness and higher consciousness existing all around us, and I'm limited by the cage of my senses and the limitations of all of the senses being somewhat of a boundary-oriented oscillating trap to keep me inside of it, but periodically I'd go outside of it and go into the supersensory level only to find out in order to bring it into the laminin, I need to spiritualize each one of the inner organs associated with the ability to hold consciousness in that level beyond just the senses. I know that's a lot, but if anybody would understand some of the languaging, maybe you can. So that's what I'm interested in, how to do that. Now, there's a lot more to what the molecules would mean. I think it's possible to identify the cluster of 1 to 3 molecules that would be directly associated with the ovarian cancer that is oftentimes an issue, which is different from a cancer of the pancreas or the cancer of the lung or cancer in the brain. There are clusters of specific molecules for each location. I think there's an underlying map of how each one of those is related to each other, and eventually I think we find it. Now, in order to occupy this, I want to occupy this at my will, my volition, but in order to do that, I've got to go up through the ladder of removing the impediments that are there in the epigenetic memories of myself and my family, and those impediments have to be emotionally dealt with and removed so I can actually access that part of my consciousness and or astral body or physical body through the etheric. Yeah, I just want it all. Hope you don't mind, but yeah, that's what I would like. And I'm just a beginner at doing this, but I'm excited about being able to learn to live it. And I think it, weirdly enough, it has to do with the appreciation of the outer material world as a reflection of the inner organs I need to develop. So, for example, the liver has a lot to do with justice, fairness, ethics, morality. So each one of the organs has a specific function. Now, I promise this is the last picture I'll show you. I could get just too carried away. One more. Well, this is kind of it. To me, this is the same laminin molecule with progressive degrees of magnitude of feeling or diameter of scale, and they follow sets of 3. In the same way that the seasons of the year are composed of 3 months, there's a 3 inside of all of this, but the crossover point is the equinox. That crossover point is also at the bottom of the heart. So this is like just a series of words, for example, but each one of these words is a cluster of feelings that I need to learn how to access, experience, feel, and mobilize. And each time I start to mobilize one, it requires that I deal with the unresolved feelings in that location. And these locations have to do with self, others, and all. So sometimes they're to do with self-image issues formulated in the womb with mother, and the relationship dynamics function, which incorporates more father, and then the higher world function of religious phenomena, spirit, and so on. This is a circulation of life. If you could see all of this in dynamic circulation, it would be far prettier than this. And these individual words that you see are lessons that I need to learn to embody. And it's easier to embody them emotionally at the time of the day that corresponds to them. Meaning there's a very different feeling at sunrise, which is an ascending sense of purpose and fire, very different than the descending feeling of sunset, and it activates different glands, organs, and body systems, lessons, sides of the family, inner world, outer world, and so on. So this is a dynamic opportunity to be able to feel it in nature, relate it to the organ, move this organ with the intensive purpose of wanting to occupy and spiritualize matter with higher consciousness. Now, how do you relate that down to a specific science of an individual molecule in combination? Well, that just sounds like a juicy topic to me. Before, I wanted nothing to do with all that materialization. Now it may be the exact answer we need in exactly that location is the empirical understanding of what activates each part of this. Now, weirdly enough, I think it also relates to all of the birth order patterns, their body types, and feelings associated with all of them. It's all one dynamic model. I think it's scientifically provable. That would be really cool. Here, I hope that answered the question for now. Otherwise, I would just keep babbling onward for hours. See you.